If there was anything that I learned from last year's shootout, it was this. Fix the Hyundai. I wasn't terribly impressed by its first appearance at that event, but it gave me loads of great data to bring home and help me sort out the car. That's a screenshot of my watch the day before I left for the shootout this year, and that's exactly what I was doing right up to the point when I did. I didn't change all that much really. I just installed a new front suspension, rear suspension, put the biggest radials under the front wheels that I could fit, moved the weight of the battery from the trunk back up front over the shortest axle, fixed the camber, fixed the alignment, fixed a litany of electrical issues including the knock sensor circuit, the wideband O2 sensors power source, the barometric circuit, 3 ECU pins, added a clutch switch, rebuilt the throttle body, and then fixed all the boost leaks. I even spiffed up the interior to improve the driver's environment and make everything in the dashboard easier to look at and to work on. The only major change was the addition of water methanol injection. That provides me with a whole new tuning experience to learn, and that's mostly what this video is going to focus on. But with an extremely wet summer resulting in few test and tune events proceeding as scheduled at my local track, and the amount of time spent with a car blown apart in pieces performing all of these modifications during the few events that did, I didn't get a chance to tune for it or to adequately test any of this before I left. But I left anyway. I loaded the car up on a trailer, grabbed all my camera gear, and drove 9 hours without stopping up and over the mountains through $20 worth of tolls to stay at the worst expensive hotel I could find. That's how much gas I burned to the drop going one way in Big Red with an extra car and trailer attached. I got a good night's sleep, and then I found myself at Busher Racing the next morning, hanging out, walking around, and talking to the participants and spectators at this pre-game event is the best way to get an idea for what you're in for at the track. There's just too much to look at, too much to see and film for me to do all the hard work that everyone puts into these cars any justice. I couldn't get a spot on the dyno before I needed to be at the Summit Motorsports Park Racers registration. Who knows, maybe next year. But after the registration, it was time to find a spot, unload the car, get my pit area set up, and fail tech because my helmet had expired. That didn't matter for test and tune, so I got right to the staging lanes for some drag passes. I'm super pumped about being here at the shootout. There's really nothing more I'd rather do than to share every detail of this event. I'd love to run around and stick a bag full of GoPros all over everybody's cars and spend the next 10 years editing it all. But when you bring a car to run at this event, suddenly you have to work. It limits how much you're able to do. Fortunately, I got some great help from a dude named Chad who used to live in my backyard that permits me to give you all a B-roll of other people's runs at the end. Lots of other great YouTubers have posted shootout videos, including drag passes, live streams, driver interviews, and other antics. Channels like Joe Wrench's, Tom's Turbo Garage, Jason Drew's DSM, That Racing Channel, Brzezinski, Haltech, DSM Worldwide Club, RPM Garage Vlogs, Drag Racing and Car Stuff, and even 1320 Video was here this year featuring some of the wildest and craziest superheroes in our community. If you can't be here in person and you like this sort of thing, please go watch their videos. The shootout is the birthplace of many legends, but I'm just visiting. My video won't be comprehensive. I'll be focusing on achieving the two seemingly simple goals that I have set for this car. One goal being to develop a solid, reliable street strip tune, and the other goal is to run 12s in a street-registered first-generation Hyundai Elantra. That's the oldest goal. It seems like a low bar to clear, but when you consider that there are only 2 other Hyundai Elantras of any year or generation on the entire planet who've ever run a 12-second quarter mile and then registered their passes, well, it's really not a low bar at all. My experience shows that it's extremely challenging. For my first run, I lined up in haste and forgot to turn on the GoPros, but Chad had my back with the big camera. I ran without launch control, without using no lift to shift, and with the water methanol kit barely on because I didn't know if it would drown my tune out or not yet. I tried to launch it at about 4,000 RPMs to see what it would do. Well, it spun. It spun first and it spun second. Terrible launch, but the car felt really strong. Overall, my first pass is 1.3 seconds faster than my first run of the previous year's shootout. That's a big improvement. but it's still 0.2 slower than my best pass the previous year. Promising though. What's not an improvement is failing to get a data log to make adjustments from and to share with you. So it looks like I'll be doing this all over again. On my second pass, I turned on launch control at 3,200 RPMs. I turned on no lift to shift and severely screwed up the shifter limiter RPMs. I have no idea how I got my paws on that, or why I missed that happening before I clicked save. Perhaps it's because 4,800 RPMs wasn't one of the choices, but you'll see what it did on that pass. Now let's pick my second and worst run of the day apart. This is one of those launches where I wish I had an extra 20 pounds of weight on my stock flywheel. The thick red line is speed, the thin one is RPMs, the white one is boost, and the green one is my clutch switch. I left the hole at half throttle off the launch limiter with pretty much no boost, and I still spun the right front wheel. As soon as the clutch engaged, I hit 1 psi and I spun it. At 1 psi, it's now established law that I cannot build any boost at all on or off the launch limiter from a stop with this car. Everything I did to the suspension since my last visit here worked spectacularly though. The tire sits flat and true during launch now. That is a thing of beauty to me. That was a big issue at the last shootout. But the camber's perfect now. I need to do a better job of offsetting my tire pressure, and we'll figure that out later. You can see right here in the log where my mile per hour hops up real fast. That's wheel spin. But then my speed signal flatlines at 11 miles per hour. From the driver's seat, it felt like the launch limiter wouldn't release and that it held me back. But the log doesn't say that at all. I believe the truth is somewhere in between because of this weird area where the speed signal flatlined and how the speed signal acts throughout the rest of the run. I think it should have registered more than 11 miles per hour when it spun, and it should have released the launch control, but it flatlined at 11 miles per hour for over 0.4 of a second. Look at this. Further down the log, the signal is jagged, bouncing all around by values as great as a 10 mile per hour in fluctuation. That would rattle your teeth out in real life if it were really doing that, but it's pulling smooth and strong from where I'm sitting. Look at what the speed signal bouncing around did to my horsepower and torque calculations in the log. The speed signal is a big variable in those calculations, so it's pretty clear to me that by these behaviors that I got a problem with my speed signal. Hopefully this is as easy as replacing the OE Elantra speedometer cable. I guess we'll find out someday, but not today. If you look at the shifts though, this is what extremely bad shifts look like. It should never take this long to shift gears, and if you're doing this on a track, you're not winning anything. The point of no lift to shift is to speed up your shifts and to enter the next gear with boost. But what happened here that made it seem like I'm granny shifting is a condition called Synchro Lockout. My shift rev limiter put the input shaft of my transmission spinning too slow for the synchros to do their jobs and let me into the next gear. This is why the shift limiter needs to be set at least 150 to 300 RPMs higher than where you're at when you dump the clutch and start off in your next gear. I accidentally set it at 600 RPMs below that point, so it took a second to coast down to a speed where my synchros could catch up. That amount of time means that I lost all my boost and a lot of real estate that I should have been using for acceleration. My 60-foot actually improved by 1/10. It's the shifts that were responsible for my 15-second time slip here. Let us never talk about this run again. Launch control is not what I came here to play with though, so I'm turning that stuff off for the rest of this event. It didn't do what I wanted it to do, and it won't help me get consistent results today, so I'm just going to pedal it from here on out. Those two runs are all I got to do on Friday. After the track closed, I drove around to log some part throttle stuff and to make some airflow adjustments to cells that were off following the throttle body rebuild. We're going to spend some time talking about this to give you an idea of just how I did that. The VE table, or the speed density tab of ECM Link, measures your air mass calculations based off of engine RPMs and whatever your map sensor says. Don't mess with this table until you know that your global fuel settings are correct, because you'll be wasting your time. The cells in this table represent percentages of volumetric efficiency. Your air mass is calculated by lining up your map signal reading with your RPMs, and then it maths out the rest of the formula to figure out how much air it needs to provide fuel for. The map value is the vertical rows, and the RPMs are the horizontal columns. When you click Track Data Log, your log file will show you which cells it's sampling from at any given moment that you select in the log. When you see that your wideband oxygen sensor swings rich or lean in comparison with the AFR EST value, you can add or remove percentages of VE from the cells that are in that table to correct it and put it back into check. If you're lean, you add more air. If you're rich, you take air away. While that may seem backwards from how the recipe is actually supposed to work, you have to do it this way because the ECU is adding the necessary fuel. That's why adding more air or increasing your engine's volumetric efficiency adds more fuel. Just be aware that the cells surrounding the one that the ECU is tracking on these tables affect the sample value that the ECU actually uses. It works kind of like splash damage in a video game. Cells adjacent to others that have a large numerical jump may affect the sampled value that the ECU reads. It'll only show you the cell or the cells that the sample point actually lands in, so you want to be sure to keep the transitions into the adjacent cells smooth unless your data gives you a reason not to. I built a settings table back at my hotel room based off of all of my logs from this day, including my drives around town. I added timing to many cells in anticipation of turning up the water methanol injection because it's barely on right now. I added air to many of the cells where my turbo was spooling up or at part throttle cruise because the log showed that I was a little lean there. And then I turned the boost up a tad in third gear. My air-fuel ratio wasn't really all that bad. It was just a little bit rich wherever the water methanol kit was spraying, and that should be expected because it's got fuel in it, and water vapor displaces some of the air that's supposed to be getting burnt. So I took a page out of the AEM water methanol kit instructions, the one about how to tune for it, and it was really easy to misinterpret because it focused on target air-fuel ratios. The instructions read, establish a base AFR that's 1 point higher than your final target AFR. So basically they want you to set at 1 point lean. I compared the AFR EST value to my wideband signal and set my target AFR as leaner by that difference. This is the wrong way to do this. It sounded exactly like what the instructions said to do, but this isn't how you do this at all on my setup. I actually gave myself the correct advice in the water meth install video that I uploaded before. You heard me say that my water methanol kit was barely on. It doesn't turn on until 11 psi and the maximum flow knob was set at 39 pounds. Because its delivery is based on pressure, and I'm only running 18 to 20 psi, it's only spraying half of its volume. I'm going to go ahead and turn the max flow knob down to 21 pounds. Let's see what this does.
And your bill's there. And I also like to thank Manly Performance coming out there, and AM Electronic Club coming over there. Hopefully you guys learned a little bit more about all those companies. Otherwise, the lady gets their 1439 to 101.
I stuck the launch as well as the reaction time, but after banging second, it felt like a slug. Looking at the logs, it's stupid rich and drowning in fuel. 10.2 to 1, come on man, I have to get some fuel out of here. Meth is on and the knock is gone, but the fuel's gotta go. What better way to not take out fuel than to adjust the octane tables again? All that's doing is moving my target, and you'll see that better after the next race. I hung out for a while with Performance Part Out and shared what I was trying to do with my tune when Tom Tharp rolled up in a bitchin' Mitsubishi Minica Dangan ZZ. It's a 650 something cc 5-valve 3-cylinder intercooled turbo K car with room enough for the whole family, so long as I'm not wedged into one of its seats.
I need a banana.
Yeah.
I need. Anybody got a banana?
It was a complete secret.
I mean, we probably don't want to get it out.
The whole dangin' thing is linked down in the description if you want to get a better look at it. Appreciatory valve wide open to Tom and to Duncan Imports for the opportunity to drive it. That thing is awesome. But back to work, and it was determined that drastic measures were needed to pull fuel out. I decided to pull fuel out using the fuel sliders. There's a number of reasons why you should not do this, most involving what happens if your water methanol kit cuts off or goes into failsafe mode. Because you won't be out of the woods being lean under boost on my car. I'd cook it in no time. But the other reason why is because of what I said earlier. If you've got speed density, your VE table is where you adjust your fuel. What the sliders will let me do, though, is figure out how much fuel by percentage I need to pull out of the VE cells wherever I am on that table when my water methanol kit is working. Does that make sense? No? I'm sorry. It'll make more sense very soon, but for now, I don't know how much fuel to take out to get me back to my target, and I'm now almost a full point rich at full boost, so I'll pull out 4.7% fuel from 5,000 RPMs to redline for starters, and see where that puts my air-fuel ratio. My pit neighbor, Rob, decided it was finally time for our rematch. I hope this continues to be a friendly annual tradition for us. Last year I caught Rob sleeping, and that was all that saved me. It was a great matchup though, but let's see what a difference a year makes.
Still hit that 3:30 qualifying time. That's what we need to do, is get that third qualifier in at 3:30. Just in case, we may need to escalate. We need to still hit our mark for that 3:30 qualifier.
We're all tied up now. Nice job, bro. You whipped my ass fair and square. I got an excuse to drop another $1,200 to come back for the tiebreaker next year. Rob, you're a great pit neighbor. I'll eat a pizza in the rain with you and Chad anytime. That's another thing. They've got some amazing pizza here. I recall the cheesesteaks hit the spot too, and this year I learned that they serve a whole quart of hand-dipped ice cream for $1. Like 8 or 10 different flavors. It's crazy. But back to the logs. At a glance it looks leaner, but it's not. That's just the effect of moving my target air-fuel ratio in the octane tables. More on that later. You can see where I spun, where it knocked, and what my wideband O2 sensor is saying. The car pulled harder than it has since I got here. It's liking this leaning out thing a lot. You can see how knock is negligible to gone, now in 3rd and 4th gear, and it's pulling enough fuel to get me back down to 10.7 to 10.8 to 1. Something I could never do before without quite a lot of knock occurring. In 2nd, I spun. My timing goofed up with the traction loss, and that's where that knock came from. So I turned up the boost a bit at the end of 1st. I turned down the boost in 2nd where I spun, and it took quite a lot more fuel out to see what I could get away with. I hit VE cells on that last run that I felt needed a little bit of attention. I had a good reason for doing it at the time, and I can't remember exactly why, but I did it. It can't hurt with how much fuel I'm pulling out though, so let's try this again. Okay, so I'm starting to get my mile per hour back again. Finally! 13:53 is my new best pass of the event. But now looking through the logs, it's apparent that 10.5% is too much fuel to pull out. I didn't spin second, but the problem with pulling fuel sliders around is that boost behaves differently at the same RPMs in different gears. This is a linear adjustment that affects fuel by the same amount at that RPM range in every gear. Because second gear produces less boost than third and fourth, it's working out of different VE cells that contain different values, and it knocks from being too lean in second. In third and fourth, it's not liking 11.1 to 11.2 to 1. I'd like to get my wideband reading around 10.8 to 10.9 to 1 if I can get away with it. I'm going to ignore second gear for now, put a little bit of the fuel that I pulled out back into it, and give it another shot. I have no idea what I'm upset about the most on this one. Crap 60 foot, crap shift, crap time slip, the fact that this is my last pass of the event, and now I get to drive 9 hours home in a hurry. Not only didn't I get my 12-second pass with this run, with a working catalytic converter, 2 amp subs, DOT-approved tires, and pump gas, I didn't even produce a pass as fast as I had before I installed the water methanol kit at this event. I knew it sucked before I got my time slip, and I was really mad. I wanted to stay and race, but I have dinner reservations tonight for my mom's 75th birthday party, so I'm out of time. Gotta go. The data though. I got data. If you haven't picked up on this yet, it seems as though I've abandoned the AFR EST value that's drifted off a full point leaner than what my wideband is reading in third and fourth gear. I haven't abandoned it. I'm aware of it. I just need to get back to it, and I will. Whenever in doubt, always listen to your wideband sensor. The best target value that I've been able to get out of pump gas alone has been a 10.5 to 1 without creating a whole bunch of knock. Don't pay so much attention to your target AFRs as you are your wideband signal and your knock sensor whenever you're leaning things out. Here I'm running knock free at 11.1 to 10.9 to 1, much leaner than I've ever been able to achieve before. This is where it's apparent that my octane rating is improving from the water methanol kit. Even though I'm missing my now incorrect target AFR value, hitting 10.8 to 11.1 AFRs with no knock on a humid summer day is still a huge accomplishment. Now I know that wherever my water methanol kit is at full flow, I need to pull around 7.4% of whatever value is in the VE cells to be in the general neighborhood of these AFRs. Doing this will let me clean up those AFR values whether the kit is spraying or not, because both the VE table and the water methanol kit's operation are based off of pressure. If I used the fuel sliders for this, I'd still be lean in every gear at every boost pressure. That would be really bad. My methanol kit's failsafe would actually be putting me right back in harm's way. But what the sliders did do is let me use a known good VE table to determine what percent of fuel, or because we're talking about VE here, what percent of air needs to be pulled out of the table. Rebuilding this table to look like this took time, tools, testing, and 2 different people's heads over a period of several weeks. Here's what we ended up with. This is the kind of thing that's needed to make my ECU and water methanol kit share the same sandbox. So forget about those fuel sliders. In my case, the water methanol kit turns on at 25.7 on this table. The reason those absolute pressure values on the left don't directly represent actual PSI is because the first bar of measurement from 0 to 14.7 is all vacuum. Know that these values are graduated in bar. 14.7 is 1 bar. 0 on this table is the maximum amount of vacuum your map sensor can read. You can compare your boost pressure in the log to the sampled cells to figure out the scale of your particular map sensor if it's different, but if you have an Omni 4 bar like me, the VE table represents 3 3/4 bar of graduation, and that the first bar in the table is vacuum. The Omni 4-bar sensor's resolution matches this table very well. You can subtract 14.7 from the pressure column to get your relative boost. If you do the math, 25.7 is exactly where 11 psi lines up. I don't know if other map sensors will deliver the same result, but the Omni 4-bar lines up pretty good like this. Here's where we made adjustments to the VE table, and where we added or removed fuel. Sorry for the cheesy Excel spreadsheet, you know. You get the red and green cells, right? Green's enriched, red is removed. Now, 10 psi is wastegate pressure on my turbo, so wastegate pressure would be 0 to 23.9 on the VE table. Those are the cells it would use at wastegate pressure. You can see the biggest fuel adjustment values were all made at 25.7 and beyond. Only minor changes were made at 23.9 and below. I plan to use this kit this way so that if it completely malfunctions or it simply runs out of juice, I never have to do a thing to my tune to get the car home safely. Turn the boost up above wastegate pressure though, and it starts spraying water methanol and pulling fuel accordingly. I couldn't accurately adjust every cell from 11 psi to infinity and beyond. In fact, I'm only using about 10 psi more above this point. At 23 psi, I'm in the 36.7 row, and I've never used the last 5 rows of this table as a result. Probably won't ever need to on this setup with a 2.5-inch exhaust and a working catalytic converter, but we'll see. The water methanol kit will spray if I could ever make 11 psi at these RPMs, so we pulled VE in cells that we're unlikely to ever use in any meaningful way. My turbo's just not efficient enough to achieve these kinds of pressures this low, that's all. Also, I shift into the next gear around 4750, but don't peak boost until 5200 RPMs, so that's where this kit's just starting to ramp up. The kit seems to be peaking between 6000 and 6500 RPMs. That's why the biggest adjustments were all made above 5000 RPMs. My rev limit is set at 7500 RPMs, and that means that none of the table beyond this point here to the right even matters. It's just this little box right here. That's what I'm using at wide open throttle above 11 psi while shifting through the gears. This is what I had to adjust to hit my target AFRs on the medium methanol nozzle. Speaking of targets, I threw out that old open loop max octane table. The gasoline only table I started with originally looked like this. Because of what my water methanol kit does to suppress knock, and what we learned from the shootout about the octane benefits achieved, my open loop max octane table was adjusted to reflect a new target AFR of 10.9 to 1. You know what happened after that, don't you? Yeah, I made a few good second and third gear pulls for tests to make sure my AFRs are lining up at wide open throttle, and they were. And then I tried repeatedly to get it to the track for another shot at 12s before the season ran out. But fall ended up being just like spring and summer here. Mother Nature wasn't having any of it. More devastating hurricanes pummeling us into flooding and blackout conditions, canceling every scheduled street or test and tune event following the shootout except for 2. I was at both of those events, but a clutch switch malfunction. You mean the clutch switch bracket you made, Jafro? Yeah, we're not supposed to talk about that. Anyway, it worked fine the night before, but failed on race day, sending me home early and frustrated. So here I am at the last and final test and tune event of the season. The track closes after this. I got my tire pressures right, it's early with great air quality, and I've got something to prove. In full disclosure, I did wake up this morning and install the large water methanol nozzle for setups between 400 and 600 horsepower. Wow, really? Really? A 1300 what? Really? A 130006. 6/10,000ths from my goal. You gonna do me like that? Nice 60 foot. Holy cow, my miles per hour is back. I got my 2.0 60-foot with these tire pressures, and I finally beat my fastest gasoline-only pass, which I posted up on Patreon for the shootout. I also managed to accidentally delete my log from this run by grabbing my laptop by the trackpad when I walked back to my truck. Sorry, yeah, I really regret that too. Next pass. The previous burnout and run raised my right tire pressure by 4 psi, but the driver's side only went up by 1.5 pounds, so I dropped them both back down to where they were earlier when it was colder. 16 on the driver's side and 11 on the passenger. Five psi offset seemed to get both wheels participating in the burnout. I made my previous pass solo because this lane was closed for an extended period of time. Someone's car apparently leaked every bit of all of its fluids, and I hope they got the prep right because I'm using that same 4,000 RPM launch again. Thinking about the spill and being cautious because of the previous spill, I bogged it. Yeah, maybe I should launch at 4,100 RPMs. Anyway, 1321 ain't too shabby. Also faster than my other gasoline-only pass. Knock is mostly under control in third and fourth, although the last run looked better because of the better air quality. The big water methanol nozzle sent me rich back to 10.5 again. And I can play with that more later, but what shows the greatest room for improvement right now is my boost pressure. You see this? It's the white line. I didn't mess with this, and I should have, but you can see how it falls off when I cross 6,000 RPMs. I need to play with my wastegate solenoid duty cycles at 6,000 RPMs and beyond to flatten off a consistent boost pressure, or I'll be chasing my tail around because I'll be bouncing all over the VE table. But of course, sitting here at the track, what do I go and do? I take fuel out of the VE table to try to lean it out some and make use of what I've got. And what I took out was nowhere near enough to make a difference. Rather than use this track opportunity to retweak the VE table, instead I'm going to show you what the difference is between using no lift to shift and not using it. If you look at the boost pressures and what they drop to when you shift, let's look at these real quick. I'm going to mark the deepest drop in boost between gears as well as the time it takes from when that starts to the moment I'm back accelerating again. Of course, first gear I didn't exceed wastegate pressure for traction reasons, but after second it's well above wastegate pressure. Now let's make a pass with no lift to shift disabled, leaving the driver to shift without any rev limiting assistance and having to use the gas pedal. Let's watch all of the effects that occur. So here we go, same lane, same launch, same weather, same day, same boost, same car. This will be a good comparison. Oh hey, how about that? I ran the exact same time as before. There's going to be some good data to explain this. He got me on the whole shot, fair and square. He reacted 3 whole hundredths of a second quicker. Nice job, Mr. Wiggins. You saw what the 1.760 foot looks like from the windshield of my Elantra that's doomed to never be able to do that because it's front wheel drive. It was a good pass for me though, and you saw me reeling him back in for a good portion of that pass. I even beat his mile per hour by a hair, but really, I don't know what more I could have done as a driver to have improved on that. Those were some great shifts, and I stuck both wheels on my launch. There seems to be no power or momentum that can overcome this car's infamous launch bog that doesn't result in traction loss. As for the log and those shifts though, look at what the boost dropped down to without no lift to shift engaged and without being at wide open throttle using a rev limiter. It all swings deep into vacuum. No matter how fast you shift without no lift to shift, you still lose all of your boost and have to build it back up again from scratch. Tick-tock. However big your tick is directly related to how long it takes to tock. Mine's not very big, so you can see the curve where that happens every time I shift. It gets the job done, but that's still lost time and energy. The overall shift times I achieved without no lift to shift were really good though. Check it out. My combined shifts were within 1/6 of a second of the previous pass. That ain't bad. But look at the difference in boost levels, the white line. With no lift to shift, after I banged second gear, the water methanol kit never even cut off until I lifted in the runoff lanes. On the second pass it shows less third gear knock because the kit stayed on. In the third run, the kit cut off because I lost all of my boost when the throttle plate closed. It had to ramp back up again and it appears to be a little bit slow, so it knocked more. I'm still running just as rich as I was on the previous pass. It's going to take a lot more than the tiny changes that I made with a large water methanol nozzle to even put a dent in my AFRs. That's going to take some work, and that's something I can work on. Let's compare the last 2 time slips though. I spun the first launch while still accelerating, resulting in that slower 60 foot. Overall, it accelerated faster through the 1/8 mile and the 1/4 mile, resulting in 0.8 mile per hour faster trap speeds and a lapse time of only 51 thousandths of a second quicker. My final pass, I stuck the launch, so even though I bogged it, the 60-foot was quicker. Since I ran the same relative mile per hour, shouldn't the 60-foot rule come into effect and have yielded a faster overall pass? Yes, and it did. The ET is reflecting that, even though it's the same time. Let's do the math. The difference in 60-foot times is 0.0717 seconds. Double that difference and you get 0.1434. That's about a sixth of a second almost. So if you subtract that from your ET of 13.2111 from the previous run, you should have a 13.0677. So what happened? I spent an extra 1.66 seconds shifting gears instead of accelerating, and I lost mile per hour respooling the turbo. That's why within 1 mile per hour that it ran the same time with a slightly better 60-foot. 70 thousandths of a second was worth 0.8 miles an hour of acceleration. Data is everything. There's an explanation for everything in the data. All 3 of these passes were faster than any gasoline-only pass I've ever made, so I was happy with this day. I hope you've enjoyed this little EFI tuning speed density with water methanol study. The Shootout is always a great time for fans of 4G63s, 4B11s, and all-year GTRs to come together. Other all-wheel drive and turbo imports have always been welcome to participate in test and tune, but rarely are they prepared for this. Don't worry, neither are the rest of us, so we've still got plenty of common in that regard. The Shootout is DSM EVO GTR heaven for a few days, and I enjoyed my opportunity to shoot my tuning video and hang out and shake hands with so many like-minded people. Thank you for watching my races and the progress on my tune. I ended my last Shootout video with other people's runs, so it only seems appropriate. Please feel free to timecode and tag your car in the comments, and I hope you enjoy. Tell us what went right, tell us what went wrong or what broke, and until next time, stay tubed.
Don't miss out on that. About 60 seconds to do so. All seconds also got a free entry, ability to get a free entry. Looks like they have to sign back. But even if you did, this one looks like because we've got raffles going on long and we're doing that be one of them. Shepherd and Jason Eckert both getting down the track here. IDRC 1150.
Make the eliminations. We need you to let us know. Stop on that. I must stop yesterday.